First, I want to say to Daryl and Tara just how sorry we are for your loss. I know when I heard what happened to Ryan on the news, it hit me really hard, and I just thought about you guys and dealing with the loss of a son. I thought about Derek and Lindy. And Derek, I actually thought about you some more when I was seeing those pictures of you and Ryan naked in the tub up there. What'd you think about that? But it's truly obvious from the support here and just the love that you feel and see in this community. I know you got a lot of your family and friends. I think of the Holbrooks. They've been through a lot, and Ryan was right there with them. Everything they've gone to. As was said earlier, some of you didn't know Ryan, but you still feel the impact and you still feel the pain. And I acknowledged to Tim earlier that there really aren't any words that I have that are magical, that are going to take away the pain. That's one of the burdens that you kind of feel when you do a funeral service. Like, I can't say anything that's going to change it. You're still dealing with the loss and you're dealing with the pain. But I would say in the midst of your sadness and in the midst of your loss, to think about the gains that you have from Ryan's life. Think how your life is better, and that's already been mentioned by many people here. You knew him in a lot of different capacities. You knew him as a fellow officer. You knew him as a friend. You knew him as a member of the community, and a lot of that's been highlighted. Can I say one thing before I go on? Do you know how intimidating it is to have 1,000 cops looking at you? And really hoping that you didn't do anything wrong. So I apologize if I look scared. But Ryan was a hoot. I knew him. He's part of the Heartland family, and a lot of those Heartland kids, they're still kids to me, are here today. And as the pastor of the church, they're here, in fact, 2 beautiful daughters. And for some reason, every Wednesday night, all the guys came over to our house after church. And oftentimes, Ryan was one of those that came over. And as was mentioned, he just had this perpetual infectious smile. I love that little video clip of him at the Royals game where he just smiled ear from ear, having a good time. But I always thought that he must be up to something, because no one smiles that much unless they're really happy or really mischievous. And I think that he is both. And as has been highlighted, he was a talker. Didn't really always know what he was talking about, but he was a talker. And he told stories, and he told long stories that sometimes did not have an ending. I was talking with Officer Joel last night at the visitation, and he said, Ryan was famous for that. He would just talk on and on and on, and he didn't finish. He'd just eventually walk away. And Officer Joel was coming on to his shift, and right as he got to work, he was dispatched, and Ryan said, "Hey, I got a story I want to tell you." And so Joel's trying to get out of there. He says Ryan's talking to him the whole way as they're walking out the door of the police station, and Joel's trying to get to his dispatch, and Ryan just keeps talking to him as they go to the car, and he rolls the window down, and Ryan's still talking to him, and eventually he just drove off, and as far as he knows, Ryan was still talking. But one of the things I'd like to do is just share some spiritual thoughts with you as well. And I say spiritual and not religious because Ryan was a spiritual person, but he wasn't necessarily a religious person. Spiritual people are in touch with God. Religious people are in touch with religion. One of my favorite books in the Old Testament now, and I think it's just because I get more confused the older I get, but Ecclesiastes is one that I really relate to because it doesn't try to explain everything. And sometimes when we talk about God and spirituality in a situation like this, we want to make claim that we have all the answers, but we don't. In Ecclesiastes 7, verse 13 and 14, it says, "Accept the way God does things, for who can straighten what he made crooked? Enjoy prosperity while you can, but when hard times strike, realize that both come from God. Remember that nothing is certain in this life. That's just reality. It also says in Ecclesiastes 3 that there's a time for everything. There's a time to be born, there's a time to die, there's a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. It doesn't say that there's a right time for it. It just says that there is a time for it. And I think that we would all agree that Ryan is gone too soon. But to me, above everything else, and like I said, my memories of Ryan are more as a kid. I didn't know him as much as an adult, as a police officer, and as a veteran. But I do believe that above everything else, that Ryan was human. He was a human being. And a couple things stick out to me about that. One, Ryan was real. He was authentic. What you see is what you got. And I appreciate that. He wasn't pretentious at all. Generally, people do not want you to see the real them. And all of us at some level tend to wear a facade. We put a face on and pretend, but I never saw Ryan in that light. He always was who he was. He was always a friend, a true friend. Someone said last night, you were either Ryan's friend or he hadn't met you yet. You know, Jesus was real. He confronted the hypocrisy of religion and the religious leaders. He called it like it was. He encountered people who tried to hide their problems, like the woman at the well. And he never condemned her for what she did. He just tried to say, it's okay to deal with the struggles you've dealt with in life. And he loved her and cared for her anyway. And I see that Ryan was much like that. And secondly, a point that's already been highlighted is that Ryan was a servant. Becoming an officer or serving his country was not what he did, it was who he was. That was just the person that he was, a servant. In the scriptures, oftentimes, Jesus kind of turned things upside down from the way that we normally view life. We oftentimes measure a person's worth by achievement, by how far up the ladder they've climbed, for what they've done, for who they are. But Jesus did not measure people in that way. In Matthew 20, he says, you know that the rulers in this world love to lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those who are under them. But among you, talking to the disciples, he said, among you it's going to be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus himself, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, did not come to be served, but to serve. And Jesus too gave his life. As I look at this gathering and think about it, I imagine that Ryan would have thought this is a little bit too much. Because he didn't do things for recognition. He did it because it was his character, because it was his nature. So I hope that we too can find that nature within us, because it's there. So in closing, I think that we shouldn't focus on what you've lost, although that's going to happen, that's going to be there. But focus on what you've gained.